Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
He's here, kids. He being Alfred University Professor Emeritus Political Science, Dr. Robert A. Heineman.
Good morning, Brian.
All right, let's start out with the campaign on the Democrat side. Biden's still ahead in the polls.
Is Biden going to be in the debates at all or not, Brian? Have you seen anything on that?
According to thehill.com, Biden is focusing on preparing for the debates.
Okay, well, I think he'd better do that. I think that's, again, we have advised him time and time again on this show not to get involved in the debates, but I guess he's casting our advice aside. I think that's a huge
bringing
mistake.
Up the old YouTubes of Paul Ryan and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
What did you think of those? What did you think of former Congressman Paul Ryan there as a debater?
I like Ryan all right. Don't get me wrong there. But as for the YouTubes, etc., I don't have any knowledge of them.
Biden says he wants climate change to be one of the big topics at the debate.
Yeah, well, go get them. Again, I don't think, generally speaking, climate change is that big an issue to most Americans.
What about the left?
Yeah, well, I think it is. And I think one of the keys on this whole climate change argument is that it gives government a greater opportunity to step in and control private enterprise. And to some extent, of course, that is needed. I mean, we don't need the Calumet River catching on fire and some of these sorts of things. And certainly the air and water have been cleaned up over the years to a large extent due to government intervention. But at the same time, these agencies and regulators don't know when to stop. And this whole climate change thing that somehow we're going to change the whole area of the climate, I think that's, put it mildly, pretty hypothetical. But it does give government a chance to expand, and for a lot of these left-wing types, that's the whole orientation they're coming from. Now, how far Biden's going to get on that wagon, I don't know. Of course, Al Gore was an important precursor of that, and some people think that, my goodness, Al Gore was right. Well, I don't know. I suppose you can't be wrong on everything. But, yeah, I don't know how big a issue that is for most Americans. Again, for most Americans, I think jobs are tremendously important, and I think the whole immigration thing is pretty important, too. But
Dr. Heineman, thehill.com points out, and this is an interesting point, the debates are going to be June 26th and 27th.
Right.
There's going to be 10 candidates one night, 10 candidates the next night. Because there's 20 Democrats running, I guess.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
So that means that, and thehill.com points this out, Warren and Sanders could end up in a debate where Biden is not even on the stage. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of talk about Biden on the night that he's not there.
I doubt it.
Really?
No. No, they're not going to do that.
They're not going to go on the attack against him because he's in the lead?
Not on the stage there.
Dr. Bob's getting a message on his phone.
Right. It's the private White House number. Otherwise I'd answer it. Yes. No, I don't know how they're going to do that. They're going to draw lots or what in terms of making a kind of fair approach. I mean, if you're the media, you obviously want some reasonably prominent candidates on each night. And if it's just a bunch of the basic duds on one night, obviously that's going to affect the ratings. So you'd want to mix that up a little bit, I think. But I don't know how they're planning to do that. And certainly Hill.com has a point there. It does make a difference how it plays out. I think the whole effort here is for some of these people to somehow make enough of an impression that they can get up into the 4 and 5% in the polls. I think, again, Mr. de Blasio has a bit of a challenge there. But who knows? He gets up there and presents himself. Again, I'm not quite certain how you end up in the debates, but I do think it is how much money you raise is one of the key variables there in terms of you raise so much money, then you're entitled to be on the debate platform. I don't know. It's a new experience here. How many did Republicans have last time? They have something like 13 or 14, something like that.
I thought it was 17.
Yeah. They narrowed down pretty fast. And obviously you would hope that the Democrats will too. On the other hand, I guess if you're a Republican, you just as soon see them up there beating on each other for as long as possible. I do think, though, that you're right about Biden in terms of how long he's going to last. I think they will be going after him, but they're not going to be doing that. They're not going to use the Trump approach and just start tearing into him on the stage. But in terms of other venues, in terms of other forms of social media, they're going to be raising questions about his age and, again, his energy level, some of these things. And I think they're legitimate questions in that sense.
Does Biden's likability factor, and he does have likability going for him,
yes.
Does that help him in the race against Trump and in the race against these other Democrats before he gets to that point where he's running against Trump, presumably?
Right. No, it certainly does help him. I think, people relate to him rather easily. I think he makes a pretty decent speech and better speech than Trump, but that's not too hard to do. Those are real pluses. Well, plus he has a considerable amount of government experience. Again, from the Trump point of view, I'm not certain all that government experience is going to do him that good. I think Trump has every right to point out that despite all his experience, the Democrats never got much done. And that puts the ball in Biden's court to say, well, I did this, I did that. I'm not certain they can point to too much there.
Now, Dr. Bob, I have a question about the agencies, at the Labor Department and so on, that put out the job numbers.
Right.
The job numbers didn't look good through the Obama administration, and they look much better through the Trump administration.
Yes.
Question. Do presidents have any control over the numbers that are released, to spruce things up to make themselves look better?
No, I think where the control comes in is in terms of how the numbers are going to be calculated, so that the Labor Department, and this goes with the Consumer Price Index as well, what factors are you going to take into consideration here in terms of calculating the final outcome? And so there, the administration may have some play, but in terms of what comes out once the calculations are completed, no, that's pretty much. Now, what's interesting right now, Brian, is this whole census question. And as you know, there's a question on the upcoming census as to whether you are a citizen or not. And the Democrats are trying desperately to have that question removed from the census, and I believe that question is before the Supreme Court right now. And within the next week or so, I would guess the Supreme Court will come down with a decision whether the Census Bureau can go ahead with that question. The argument is, of course, that it favors well, I guess the argument is it favors the Republicans. I'm not quite certain how that works out, but the argument is basically that people who aren't citizens, illegal aliens to a great extent, won't answer the question. And then so that the numbers in some of these areas, the census numbers, will be lower than the actual number of people in the district. And that Democrats think that will disadvantage them in terms of drawing congressional districts and other districts. And I mean, that's possible, that's true. You really don't know quite how that's going to work out. On the other hand, the Census Bureau's argument is, I think, that they're supposed to count everybody, and that they can't worry about people not answering because they're afraid that they're ex-convicts or illegal aliens or who knows what. Again, it'll be interesting to see how the Supreme Court, if they defer to the Census Bureau or whether they intervene.
Talking to Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Alfred University professor emeritus, here on the Friday Newsmaker show. You know, this let's bring Don Jr. back again and again and again thing. When does that end, Dr. Heineman?
I really don't know. The thing is getting tremendously complicated there. There are all kinds of specific issues and specific people that various committees are trying to force to present documents or appear before them. And in a number of the cases, the Trump administration has told these people, no, we don't want you appearing or testifying. And obviously a lot of these are going to end up in the courts. And the question is really, how far is are the courts going to allow the president to extend his executive privilege? The Supreme Court has already held that the president can't extend it to criminal actions. But most of these people, there are really no criminal charges involved. Congress is simply trying to probe around to try to find some kind of criminal action. And to be able to force people to do this or that in that respect, I think is, I'm not certain how far Congress can go with that. But again, this will end up in the courts. And again, on a number of these issues, members, Donald Jr. has appeared. Hope Hicks is now one of Trump's top aides. She's now in private business. But she's agreed to appear. And some of the documents from the Mueller investigation, they're going to make them available. So there's all kinds of negotiating going on there, and here and there, Congress is going to get some testimony. But you have to be very careful in these kinds of situations if you're testifying before Congress, because you're under oath and you misremember or you misstate or you lie.
Different people brought up the perjury trap possibility for Don Jr.
That's where you run into a real problem, yeah.
We're talking to Alfred University Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. Robert A. Heineman. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Albany stuff. Stay with us.
McCoy's Auto Collision on State Route 36 just south of Canastillo is a full-service collision shop offering not just collision work but also paint work. McCoy's has a 24-foot frame straightener with 3-dimensional measurement. McCoy's accepts all insurance companies and can work with you on any deductible you may have. At McCoy's, they work for your interest and your benefit, not the insurance companies. All work is fully warranted and they offer a free loaner car. McCoy's Auto Collision, State Route 36 in Canastillo, where customer satisfaction is always number one. Phone 607-698-9900.
Back with Dr. Robert Heineman of Alfred University fame. Dr. Bob,
yes.
Let's talk about that state Senate race. Allegheny County legislator Kurt Crandall and George Borrello, the Chautauqua County executive, both Republicans. They've got a primary coming up June 25th.
Yes.
That's a Tuesday. What's the latest there? You've been keeping us up to date on all the behind-the-scenes stuff there.
The Flanagan team out of Albany and Westchester are doing everything they can to push Mr. Borrello. And again, using Senate Republican campaign funds for Mr. Borrello. And it's right there on their literature and their Facebook things and such. But my friends over in Chautauqua County informed me yesterday that they were getting mailers now that are financed by the State Republican Committee, which is really bizarre. Why the State Republican Committee? Now, let me distinguish. You got the New York State Committee, which is chaired by Ed Cox and will be chaired by Mr. Langworthy, and is composed of state committee people across the state. And then you have the New York State Republican Senate Campaign Committee, which is dedicated to electing and financing Republican candidates for the state Senate. And they're the ones that have been pouring money into the Borrello campaign up to this point. And because I think Mr. Flanagan has pretty much handpicked Borrello to be Kathy Young's successor. But now, apparently, the New York State Republican Committee has been kicking in some money for the Borrello campaign, and people just can't understand what's going on there. Why, this Republican's going to be elected from this seat regardless. But I'm thinking that Mr. Flanagan and his folks may well be running out of money in the Senate Republican Campaign Committee and have turned to the State Republican Committee to help them out, which is a pretty clear commentary on how effective Mr. Flanagan is.
Can I ask a question there?
I don't know. Yeah.
John Flanagan, the state Senate Republican leader from Long Island.
Right.
Is he a little over-focused on this race?
He certainly is. I just people are just shaking their heads. First of all, he obviously doesn't like Kathy Young much, if at all. But now he's kind of raised it to the point where it's kind of a matter of his effectiveness. And if he loses this race, and Kurt Crandall wins, it's going to be kind of a slap in the face to Mr. Flanagan, and it will be, I think, kind of a vindication of Kathy Young and her opposition to Flanagan and his minions. So I guess he's got to the point where, it's a matter of just political self-respect in terms of pouring money in. Now, again, who's going to be contributing to the state Senate Republican campaign so that Flanagan can maintain his self-respect? I don't know. Maybe there's some money out there, but it's not. It's just strange. On the other hand, you have these big real estate interests in New York City who have funded the Republicans year in and year out, and now the legislature's coming through with limits on how high you can raise the rents and things of that sort in New York City, which, of course, real estate people are not happy with at all. But I don't know where they're going to turn now because, there aren't any. The chances of Republicans gaining a majority in either one of the state assembly chambers is pretty limited. So.
Well, one last question for you here, Dr. Heineman, before we go. Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Yes.
He's now saying that Democrats should all be primaried, and he's talking about the state Democrats, should all be primaried if they can't legalize marijuana and pass a more progressive agenda.
He's saying something like that?
Yes.
Well, I don't think he's in favor of legalized marijuana at this point, is he? I mean, that's a strange thing.
As of 2 days ago, he was.
Well, that's just very strange. I do see, though, that Illinois has passed legalized marijuana now, and something else. I think gambling. I'm not certain. With planning to raise taxes from it to try to balance the state budget. I think that's, in terms of human costs, that's going to be pretty serious. But in any case, New York still is not, and that's strange for Cuomo to say something like that. I would have to fact check that, Brian. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Cynthia Nixon put out a statement, and she was the governor's former progressive opponent there on the Democratic ticket. Cynthia Nixon put out a statement saying that even though she lost the election, she won in terms of influencing state politics. Would you agree with that?
Well, you could. And knowing Cynthia Nixon, she could probably put a positive spin on the whole thing. But I think you have to agree that New York state politics have moved to the left pretty dramatically here in the last 6-8 months. So if Cynthia Nixon's responsible for that, I guess she's welcome to take credit for it. But, of course, you have that fine congresswoman from, where's she from, Queens or the Bronx?
AOC. I think that's Westchester County.
Westchester? No, I thought she was from Long Island somewhere.
Okay, she's from Westchester County.
Oh, okay.
Original.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, to go to Harvard, I guess you got to be from Westchester. I mean, somebody's got to have influence there, yeah.
Hey, speaking of Nixons, we were just talking about Cynthia Nixon. And this is a PS to my final question. Any thoughts on John Dean resurfacing at that hearing in Washington?
That's really weird.
That Jerry Nadler brought him up?
Yeah, no, that's just strange.
I wasn't sure what the purpose of that was, except to tie Trump to Nixon.
Yeah, well, no, I think what they're trying to do here is build this whole penumbra of against Trump, that there's just so much illegality here that it's clearly a far more serious situation than the Nixon administration. And first of all, you got to find some illegality here. Not that some of Trump's associates haven't gotten themselves in trouble, but for the most part, as far as I can tell, none of these criminal charges and such have anything to do with the Trump administration. Things that these people were involved in previous to working for Trump or the campaign. Whereas Nixon, it was clear use of Nixon's supporters and staff people who were involved in not only the break-in, but also in the massive cover-up. But be that as it may, this is an attempt, again, to kind of color all this and try to give some sort of credence to some effort at impeachment or something of that sort. And the country, I think, is just kind of shaking its head and moving on to the NBA Finals or something of that sort. Yeah.
Well, Doc, they always try to tie him to Nixon. Now, I'm not one of these people that's always trying to, and I like Pat Buchanan in some ways, but Buchanan spends too much time trying to redo Nixon's image, I think.
I see.
And I'm not at that level where I do those things.
Redo Nixon's image? What do you mean?
I'm not trying to fix the reputation of Joe McCarthy or Richard Nixon or any some of those lost causes that the conservatives try to pick up.
You can make a pretty good case for Nixon in many ways.
Oh, I know.
So my great regret is, of course, I was too young to vote for him 3 times. But you just have to live with those. Can't do much about that.
Well, if that's all you're worried about, Doc, hey, you're ahead in the game.
Yeah, we're trying. Yes.
See you next week.
Hope so.